Hello and welcome to Rollbar Academy. Rollbar Academy is a video series designed to help get you acquainted with Rollbar as a product and some of the configurations and best practices that come along with that. So this is the first video in the series. This is the Rollbar Basics session. With this, we'll be doing a product intro and a few other things. So here's a brief look at the agenda we have for today. First, we will introduce Rollbar. With this being the first video, we need to set the stage for why this product is needed. Then we will look at a brief demo where we set up our first Rollbar project. I'll be doing that live as we go through it. Then we'll do some UI navigation. We will review the web app and how best to interact with that. And we'll do a little bit of Rollbar terminology, some of the nomenclature that we use within our own domain to describe some of the working items that we have. All right, so first of all, what is Rollbar? So we describe ourselves as a continuous code improvement platform. And so what that means is we are focused on your code as our primary working ground. So with all companies being software companies, and with software relying on the code that is created for those business purposes, every business has a very important focus, or should have a very important focus, on their code quality. And Rollbar helps to shine a better light on that, to provide more visibility into code operations and code quality. And this is done through a number of features and foundational items that we have. So one of the core components of the Rollbar product is the error monitoring and reporting system. So in real time, as these errors pop up in your code and in your application, they are sent over to our platform, where they are then grouped and analyzed to determine the root cause. So the real-time reporting of those, and then the ML-powered grouping engine that deduplicates exceptions and classifies them into root cause. Both of those are very foundational to the product. And then with the better visibility and insight gained from that process, you can then automate the remediation workflows around that. So you can begin to automate things like deployment rollbacks and feature flag toggling based on where you have identified the root cause of certain exceptions and certain problems. And in order to get this into a wide variety of hands and to support a number of different use cases and domains, we have a very wide support for different languages and frameworks, a number of integrations, some of those that we will see in these Rollbar Academy videos, and of course a strong security platform to support that as well. So we will review a few of these things as we go through it today. We will mostly look at the first two items, sort of the bread and butter of the Rollbar agent that goes into your code, as well as that web app. All right, so now I'm going to do a brief rudimentary demo. So for this, we're going to make some assumptions about folks having experience within the real-world developer space. So for context, what I am going to be troubleshooting or sort of roll-barring here today, this is a very basic web page with some JavaScript functions inside of that. So technically, I'm going to be monitoring the JavaScript that lives in this page. And it's very basic. This is not designed to be challenging in any way. It's mostly just designed to show the mechanics of the error reporting process. So that is the page in a text editor. This is what it looks like in Chrome, the browser that I'm going to be using today. So just for this, I'm going to hide my console and show that these donation buttons are not working. So clicking on these, let's say we expect for it to be some sort of thank you message or some action to be taken. We're not seeing that. Here in the console, we do have some info about that. We're going to try to expand upon that with Rollbar. So beyond what you can see here, we have deeper context, and we'll see some root cause analysis going into grouping these as well. So we can see there's pretty constant stream of these. If we choose to try to get these to work. All right, so this page here is set up within my Rollbar demo account. So if you're first creating your Rollbar account, if this is the first project, then you will find yourself on this project setup wizard. So here, a brief look into some of the more popular frameworks that we have. These are the ones that are most heavily used, but we have them categorized here as well, backend, front end, and mobile, or we can just see a list of all the languages that we currently support. So within here, there are even variants of certain languages. We can see the different versions of Angular, the servlet specification for Java, and there's many different types of JavaScript, with some of the packages being separate from what we consider the default JavaScript. So that is what I'm going to choose here. Since I'm doing browser.js, since it's not wrapped up in Node or Angular or React, anything like that, that is the choice for me. And the setup wizard is going to generate code snippets and commands to help you through this process. JavaScript is our most popular front-end framework, but another reason that I like to demo with this, it's very portable. It's very easy to just take this code snippet and add it to a web page to get that visibility. So with me copying this to the clipboard, the instructions here will tell me, put this in the head of the page and make sure it's before the other script tags. So that makes make sure that we capture everything from all scripts as long as ours comes first. So here, inside the head, before the first script block, I can paste this snippet. There's some minified JS in here. This is all the Rollbar agent and the functions that it needs. So we don't really care about that. We just take it on faith that it works. And up here at the top, there's some configuration. The main thing that's specific to this project, the thing that's required to get these events into the platform, the access token that validates us to the specific project here, this basics project. And this page will sit here and spin and wait for that first event to come in. We have a way to test that with this command. So what I'll do, first let me save the updated page here. So got that saved with the snippet in place. I can refresh this just to make sure that we have the latest version. And there's a couple ways I could test it. I could just try to send an error, or I could use this command. So we'll do the command first just to verify that it works. So window on error, it's going to send across this as a test. So it returns us this message undefined. And this page, it's pretty good about auto refreshing, but I have found, there we go. As I was waiting there, it detected this event. It shows that it came in less than 20 seconds ago. There's just one that we've seen so far. So there we have our first event. We have validated that the connection is working. Rollbar is reporting from this page back to the platform now. So this is my basics project. So just to show how it's going to group these, because they're the same root cause, because they have the same contents, those will get grouped under this first message. So in this case, I'll just manually refresh that. We should see more there. Yes, because I've done this on a page without refreshing, we're only seeing the first. So I believe that will trigger a second that we would then see. Yep, so there's the second event. So the grouping engine is intelligent enough. I mean, in this case, there's not a lot to group, but it's going to stack these and consolidate them to a single item. And we'll review some terminology in a second. So looking at the other things that we get, there's an uncaught reference error that comes from the $100 donation button. And the $25 donation button has a different message. We can see some details about those here. If we go back to Rollbar, we should be able to see a little bit more information that comes in here. So these are those two new items, as we call them. So this is the item menu, and items are sort of the most granular working components that we have. So we evaluate items and we work against them. the individual occurrences that fall under those, we don't necessarily get into that level of detail, at least not all the time. So there's something missing here, this respond with that I tried to use as a part of the code apparently. So it's a reference error, it's not defined. And if I look here, just right out of the gate without me setting up source control, I'm getting some useful telemetry here. It tells me about what was going on this page, and then I can even see the coordinates for where specifically this problem occurred. So line 28, column 5. So just to quickly go through the workflow here, at line 28, column 5, this is where that command began. So the problem is that there is no method definition for respond with. It was something that maybe I forgot to define, maybe it was just a mistaken method name used accidentally. So just to try to follow the workflow, what I would probably do here, I would get rid of that. I'll just quickly comment it out, and I'll replace it with an alert, which is a defined thing inside of the JavaScript page here. So we'll just do that for just this one. So if I refresh this, press the $100 donation button, now it pops up with a message that does say thank you. So my little alert message. And for the purpose of the demo, we'll say that it's fixed. It's pretty clear it's not doing anything, but good enough for me for now. So in Rollbar, what I may then do is choose to resolve this item, and that would then move that out of my workflow. So now I'm back down to the 2 items. We would consider these the outstanding issues that I need to address within my code. And then we know that the first one of these isn't really a code issue, it was just something we sent as a test. All right, so I think that's a pretty good introduction to Rollbar as a product. Mechanically there, we can see that it is reporting these exceptions to us. It's doing some analysis. It's giving us some good information right off the bat. And there's a lot that we can do to improve that with some of the other features. I will briefly touch on those as we do a rundown of the UI and try to set up the stage for some of the next videos. All right, so we'll pivot back and finish out the slide deck. We'll do the Rollbar terminology. So I mentioned a few of the specific terms that we use, items and occurrences. And before I go too much further down the path of using those, just want to make it perfectly clear how we define those and what they do for us. So bear with me, this will just be a few slides. We'll jump through these, and then I'll do a UI review, and that will close out the session. All right, so projects. When I talk about the thing that I set up there, the code base that I just integrated and began monitoring with my Rollbar agent, we call that a project. So usually that's going to represent a code base or a service or an application. So the relationship between all of those is usually one-to-one. And we also try to think of this, if we can tie this to a single Git repository, that's another way to think of this relationship. So the idea behind that is these different code bases are going to be updated separately of one another. They get deployed independently. And in a lot of cases, they have different teams with different priorities and goals. So a lot of the settings in a Rollbar account are at the project level, giving each team the autonomy they need without making things overly complicated and giving each team their own account. So we'll see different project setups. If you do have a monolithic code base, you may just have one, but typically we see multiple projects, and the comprehensive view across those is something you can use in Rollbar, or choose to split that down to the more granular individual views. All right, so 2 of these terms I already mentioned as a part of my demo. Let's make sure that they're clearly understood. So an occurrence is a single reported event. So every time the agent in the code sends something over to the platform, that is one occurrence. And we usually focus on the errors and exceptions. That is our primary use case, but we do also support the sending of log messages to Rollbar. So those will come with context just like the exceptions, but considering that they are not exceptions, they don't come with stack traces. Log messages are usually just plain unformatted text or unstructured text, but sometimes we see those logged in structured formats as well. So a fingerprint, when we talk about grouping and consolidating those occurrences down into the single root causes and the working items, there is a mechanical component to that, the fingerprint. That's more of a back-end thing. We don't look at that too heavily, especially now that we have machine learning that does most of the grouping for us. But if you hear the term fingerprint being used, it's a grouping term, and that's sort of the identifier that an occurrence will get to apply it to a given item. And then the item, that is our main working piece. So we look at the items to try to understand the individual root causes, the code problems, and where we would go to fix those. So items are what we usually investigate, and that's why we resolve at the item level, because it's usually the case that a single code fix will take care of a single item. But we want the visibility around that. As you get into deploying and showing new releases and versions on Rollbar, you can track your version health and try to identify where problems are being introduced. So going a step beyond just the reactive nature of fixing the code and trying to prevent those problems from making it in the first place. All right, and so after I introduce these two attributes of a Rollbar item, I'll show them in the UI just to make sure that's clear. So first we have the item status. So as a part of my demo, I showed two of those statuses, the active and the resolved state. Anything that comes into Rollbar is going to default to the active state, and that's meant to represent items that are ongoing issues. We know that they're present, and we need to fix the code to stop them from occurring. And once we've done that, we might consider them resolved. So we have the ability to set up alerts in Rollbar that will be in a later session. Anything in the active state is going to be tracked against those alert thresholds to make sure that alerts are fired when certain criteria are met. And the active list, as we saw on my items menu, those are on the working list on that dashboard. So this is your primary state. This is what most of the things that you care about are going to be in that active state. So then resolved, when you have presumably fixed the root cause of a given item, you can mark that as resolved in your Rollbar account, and that will declutter your working list. So things that are resolved are taken off that dashboard, and we've deprioritized those a bit. What this is not going to do is to hide these and prevent them from resurfacing. So if a resolved item, for some reason, if it occurs again, then we're going to see that. It's going to reactivate, go back into the active status. There's usually an alert specific to tracking things that are reactivated, so you might get a Slack message or some type of notification about that. And so then it will reappear on your dashboard because it's back in the active state. So there's a couple of cases if things are still occurring but they're happening in an older version. When we talk about versioning your items and tracking multiple versions in production or something like that, it is possible for resolved items to occur. If it's in an older version, then you would say, that's a version problem, not a code problem. But for the most part, anything that's resolved, if it happens again, it's going to be put back on your list, because that means what you thought was working as a fix did not for some reason. All right. right, and then we have the muted state. So active and resolved, there's sort of the flow back and forth between those states. You fix items, you move them to resolve. Sometimes they come back up. The muted state, this one is a bit more permanent in that it's not ever going to re-trigger on its own. And this is the best way to deprioritize something and to just move it out of your list completely. So a muted item may be one that has a very chatty occurrence load, so maybe there's a lot of events coming in, but it's not causing real problems. So that may mean that you can afford to work on that later. You may have more pressing issues. So muting that, you're not going to continue to get Slack messages or alerts about it. It's not going to appear on your dashboard. It is going to still count against your ingest. We are processing that, we're ingesting it, grouping it, and analyzing that. So that way, if you need to go back and address it, you do have your full paper trail, your context of all the data that we received. The reason we call that out is just to make sure that it's clear all of these count for billing purposes, since they do make it into our platform and we do all of the typical actions as we would for an active occurrence. These are still a part of that process. So again, muted items, the one caveat with these is that if something is muted and forgotten about, then it could continue to incur ingest costs without any real visibility into that happening. So make sure you do some housekeeping on those muted items from time to time. All right, so sort of adjacent to the status, we also have the severity level. So using these two in combination gives you a good two-dimensional way to categorize and prioritize these issues. So severity levels, it's basically an ordinal system of marking importance. So in descending order from most to least important, we have critical, those being top level priority, then error, warning, info, and down to debug. This corresponds with log levels, but we don't have to think of this as explicit mapping between log levels and severity levels. We can use these in a more subjective way to categorize these and sort the things that are truly most urgent to us. So by default, the things that come in, the items that we receive, they will be they'll be error level by default. So when we see those come in, the orange circle that we saw in the items menu, when I navigate back to that in a second, we'll see there's color-coded severities, and they're a part of the items menu. Both status and level are a part of that to allow you to filter and control your working list and the flow of items in that. Changing the levels of an item. So the error level is what we get by default, but you can change it in the UI. You have user controls over changing the level, and changing that will then cause all new occurrences of that item to persist the same level that was selected. So you can choose to send the first item with a given severity from the code, and that will be respected only in that first case. But then if you go and manipulate these through the UI, then that will save and persist that level to allow you to continue to work and filter with those different levels. All right, so back to the web app. Let's look at status and level, and then we'll do a more comprehensive rundown of the UI. So this is my basics project with the 3 items I've ingested. Since I haven't manipulated the level on these, we can see there's the orange circle, and we can see the filter over here, the checkbox for these. So if I toggle off the errors, then we see those fall off the list. And within here, at the item detail level, this is where we do a lot of our investigation. I would be able to see information about the different occurrences I've seen. There's a lot of useful stuff there. But with the level, I can just change that. Maybe I lower that to a warning. It may not be quite important enough to categorize as an error. And then we also have the two status options here. So with the resolved, the different versions where it talks about using an older version, this is how you could potentially work that into the equation. So if I resolved something in version 13.7 of my code, but someone was reporting errors from something like 13.5, then we would know that they've just got the older code, and once they update, that problem will go away. All right, so back to the items menu, let's look across all my projects. So this is a list of the projects I currently have in this account. And here I can select a few more of those. This is going to show us some useful stuff on the UI. So we can see the color-coded levels. I can mouse over this. It'll give me the tooltip. We have a histogram. There's not really a lot coming through here to see that, but we'll see trends of these over a 24-hour period. We can count the total number of occurrences as well as seeing the unique IPs affected by this. So most of my demos are pretty singular in their impact because they're usually not deployed anywhere, and it's just things that I set up for these purposes. But sometimes my VPN gets switched over. You can see that there's a couple of IPs being logged there. This one I've used it a handful of times, I believe, so we see the number of IPs. And so all of these filter settings over here allow me to get creative with how I choose to view my working list. We can report any environment tag that we want. I only see production and development here, but whatever value you send from the code will be detected and put into this list. So you don't have to use preset values. You can scale out this list to fit all the different environments that you have. All the languages that have been detected within the account are shown here as a filter criteria as well. We have a date range, select what time range you want, check the boxes for which levels you want, and then for status we have this new and reactivated only thing here, and then we also have a more explicit status filter. So these are the items that I've resolved in this account. There's that one from this demo, the respond with. So this just giving you better control over your working list. Filter this down to just the things that you care about. Here's the one item that I've assigned to my personal account, so maybe I just want to see that. So that's the items menu. This is going to be, most often this is going to be your starting point. We have a dashboard that's more of a splash page. It's the aggregate project view with a nice histogram here. But honestly, this is just more of a starting point. I would just drill down into that from here. So the project isolation, I can see different projects and a few other operational dashboards from here. So that's from the dashboard level. But if you're going to investigate and resolve things, probably going to be using that items menu. All right, so the left margin controls most of our top level menus. We have versions in here. When you report your code versions with those items, and when you report your deploys to Rollbar, you'll start to get some comprehensive visibility. You can then see further between the different components of your software lifecycle to better understand where things are going wrong. So here I can see that certain versions, these are just the Git revisions that I've gotten those hex values. When the errors are reported in a given version, then that will aggregate these together. So this version has 4 new errors and 1 that was reactivated. This tracks version health. I can see the particularly ugly versions here. So 13.7 did have a number of errors in that. So more filtering here. You can do some of the same stuff. Then we have the deploys menu. I don't actually have any deploy notifications set up in my demo account, but just to briefly look into the Rollbar company account, this is, I call it the meta Rollbar. This is what your deploy screen will look like. You can see all of the deploys and their statuses here. And if you choose a single project and a single environment, then you can also see the list of undeployed changes. So we're not seeing that here. See if I can quickly find that. I don't want to waste too much time on this. So let's try development. Okay, so couldn't find anything quickly. If you do see those here, there will be a list above the changes that were deployed. So good place to see what's going on in your code there as well. All right, and then another menu below that, the RQL menu. I prepared this tab just to make sure that these query results were showing. So this will be covered in depth in another session, but RQL is basically all of your Rollbar data available for querying. So it's basically a SQL flavor of language. We do have the documentation on our docs pages. So there's the schema that you can find there. Just want to briefly show that you can get these table results. There's some sample queries down here and some tooltips to help you understand how best to use that. This UI version is still more of an alpha type feature. It's still not that performant, but this is available through the API as well. So more on that to come later. All right, so the last of these major menus is people tracking. This is a great support tool. This is where you can take another approach to identifying certain affected people or root causes that may have something to do not with the code. So here I can see that there's a number of people that have been affected by certain items. And the one at the top of the list here, we see there were some distinct items that came in and the number of occurrences. So looking here, this is basically a histogram of occurrences, not just items, but it's showing me every occurrence that they've encountered that we've tracked here. So this is a good sort of user history. It may not directly tie into like a session history, but as a result of the errors that they experienced, this is sort of a version of that story. So when support folks receive tickets, we found that Rollbar is actually a great place for them to go and begin their investigation, because they can see, maybe this is a behavioral problem. If all the things are just occurring with one user, maybe there's something wrong with their session. Maybe it's something that they are doing wrong. But that also is tied into these items, and we can see from the item view that we have affected people as well. So I could see this is who was affected, the total occurrences, and the last time that happened. All right, so just to round out the UI intro, there's two different versions of the settings menus that we have for your account and projects. So you can see here on this sort of sub-margin here, there's a number of menus, all these different settings options. But this is the account level settings. This is just for account owners. This is where we do the more administrative stuff, like control who's assigned to what teams and who's invited to Rollbar. You can do account security stuff in here. You can look at your billing and usage. But for most of the operational things, for most of the things that affect your user experience and control, things like grouping and alerts and that stuff, that's done at the project level. So when you click on a project from your projects list, it's going to change the submargin. So here we now see a new set of menus. And this set of menus is specific to the basics project. So these things that I modify are then only going to be at the project level. And that's how you can get these more granular controls over who's receiving alerts. Your teams can group their items differently to apply to their specific domains better. Maybe you take some of the less important projects and you rate limit those to make sure that they don't use too much of your account ingest. So all these things possible at the project level. Going into notifications, we can see these are the things that we currently support with out-of-the-box integrations, and then we also have support for the more generic payload as well. All right, so I'm not going to go through all the settings. We'll cover a lot of these in the feature and use case videos that we do with more depth. Last thing to say about sort of the UI and the settings control that you have, you then also have your user account and some of the settings managed within that. So this is my work account here, and I can see the teams that I belong to, some of these across different accounts, a few of those that I work in. And then there's the connected accounts. So when I go through and try to connect directly to certain things with my user account, like GitHub, this would be a place to connect to that. So some of the other options, things like the ticketing systems, the chat tools that you may integrate with as well. All right, so just to briefly look ahead at what type of stuff will be covered in later videos. Following this one, there's a couple that sort of come in procedural order. We look at the item workflow and the occurrence deep dive. Those are a couple of the ones that come immediately after this. So those recordings can be found on the Rollbar Academy website. That link is provided here on screen. It's just rollbar.com/Rollbar Academy. And then we also have a YouTube channel now as well. So video recordings for the Academy can be found in both places. I have it bookmarked. If you go to Rollbar, or if you go to YouTube and search for Rollbar, you'll see the one with our new logo. There may or may not still be an older account, but we have feature videos in here, the Rollbar Academy sessions that have already been recorded on live webinars. We even have customer stories, testimonials, things like that. So great resource to check out for more video learning content similar to what we're offering here. All right, and that concludes our video. So thanks everyone for watching. I hope you found this informative, and have a great day.